Mankind is no stranger to war. Humanity has been waging war for almost as long as it has existed. For countless generations, war has been an arms race, a cycle of creating weapons and defenses against said weapons. The inception of armor, the use of weapons to pierce or to shatter armor, cavalry, projectiles, artillery, firearms. Humans have always changed the battlefield as warfare constantly evolved through changing doctrines, strategies, and tactical options. Air power had become the new sign of a nation's dominance by the end of the Second World War, and he who controlled the skies controlled the battlefield. Leading nations responded to this maxim, developing ever more advanced and powerful aircraft to claim aerial superiority. The Beta invasion changed this with the introduction of the laser class. They raked the skies in laser irradiation for dozens of kilometers and swept humanity's air forces out of the skies. With the skies denied to modern militaries, and the Beta rapidly overwhelming their surface forces, the need for new weapons specialized to combat the Beta was desperately sought. A magic bullet, which the United States had already started looking for. The NCAF-X project, led by the MacDill Aerospace Corporation, was commissioned in 1967 by the US government as a new means to respond to nascent threats coming from the moon, developing a new cutting-edge weapon to make aircraft viable once more. MacDill was chosen to lead the project based on their experience working on exoskeleton systems for space development. They had been first to adapt the proprietary MMU, the Manned Maneuvering Unit, into a versatile surface combat weapon for extraterrestrial use. This would eventually lead to the development of humanity's first tactical surface fighter. The F-4 Phantom, developed by the US, was deployed to the Eurasian continent in 1974. It was the first weapon of its kind, boasting a jet's high mobility and the firepower of a main battle tank. Capable of walking, running, jumping, and gliding along the ground, the F-4 was quickly adopted by militaries worldwide and became the basis for various TSF variants based on its design. With the development of the TSF, it saw gradual adoption into many prevalent militaries, and was integrated into humanity's forces engaging the Beta. To that effort, former Air Force pilots from around the world were retroactively recruited to pilot these new machines of war. The former fighter pilots handled TSFs as they would any other airframe, and still adopted formations and tactics meant for jet fighters. This proved to be outdated thinking, as these strategies did not account for the TSF's three-dimensional maneuver capabilities, thus leading to mounting casualties and the coining of the infamous 8 minutes of death. To combat this, a completely new and more specialized training program was developed. This resulted in exponentially less casualties fighting the Beta, with a new program and a new weapon forged in the trials of combat. It was henceforth necessary to give the operation of these machines a new role. These new breed of soldiers would become known as surface pilots. The TSF is the most versatile weapon mankind has created to this point. It is capable of three-dimensional combat across a wide variety of environments, and boasts a suite of advanced electronics and impressive armor for a weapons platform meant to fly at high speeds. All TSFs are also equipped with jump units attached to the hip. These rockets allow for its three-dimensional maneuvering, as well as making it capable of performing G-force intensive actions otherwise impossible in conventional aircraft. Additionally, TSFs are bipedal machines. Compared to aerial units, which would always expel fuel simply to hover or cruise along, a TSF can conserve propellant by relying on internal batteries to walk and run, thus saving fuel for combat situations or escaping from hostile attacks. When deploying on the battlefield, TSFs can be equipped in various configurations. These vary from nation to nation and their battle doctrines. Initially, the first generation TSFs were equipped with a WS-16 assault cannon, consisting of a 20mm autocannon and a 105mm smoothbore cannon slung underneath. These new weapons were used in universal tactics set forth by the new TSF battle doctrines. Armaments were allocated to the roles assigned to each TSF in a formation based on configuration. These roles became known as the Storm Vanguard, Strike Vanguard, Gun Sweeper, Gun Interceptor, Impact Guard, Rush Guard, and Blast Guard. Each position in the unit is assigned their own designated variant. For example, the Strike Vanguard, taking up the head of the formation, would typically be equipped with an assault cannon, 2 PB supercarbon swords, 2 PB supercarbon knives, and supplemental armor. However, the loadout for these roles can vary, as each nation's armed forces modified them to suit their own needs. For example, the East German Army replaced one of the Strike Vanguard's PB swords with a second assault cannon, and the United States, with its doctrine prioritizing long-range fire over close-quarters engagement, equips their TSFs with only assault cannons. Such deviations mark each nation's preferred combat style, or even how they were forced into these changes by the ever-changing beta threat. Compared to modern militaries of today, the TSF is a radical step away from the conventions of modern warfare. However, in the world of Muv-Luv, it is a mainstay of the times in which humanity is in. Nearly every aspect of battle requires their utilization. When considering the employment of the TSF, which is a weapon unparalleled in mobile warfare, it is necessary to remember that they are expensive, having an estimated cost of a platoon of main battle tanks or even more. Losing them in battle is a costly ordeal in the light of humanity's ever-dwindling resources. But the biggest loss were the surface pilots themselves. The high attrition rate to the beta has severely depleted many nations of their manpower. Experienced surface pilots hold an approximate worth equivalent to that of a TSF, if not more. But even with the likely possibility of losses in combat, humanity has no choice but to fight onward. It is therefore necessary to use them in a way befitting of their abilities, while being as effective as possible. TSFs, being capable of their three-dimensional maneuvering, are considered to be more directed into the infantry and combined arms role. Training for surface pilots hammer the fundamentals of infantry fighting and tactics. These basics are considered to be the most important in the operation of TSFs when compared to other skills involved. Additional aspects from the formerly utilized Air Force organizations were still incorporated within TSF unit structure and military ranks. And with their use of ground forces, Army terms are included as well. Examples of such organizational nuances appear in the use of unit designations, like the Tactical Armor Regiment, which consists of 108 TSFs, or the Tactical Armor Battalion, consisting of 36 TSFs. These formations were further broken down into squadrons of 12 and flights of 4, respectively. However, for the most part, TSFs kept their roles and strategies to the infantry and combined arms doctrines, all the while keeping mobile warfare as their baseline tactic. They struck wherever possible on the flanks of oncoming beta with shock and awe, as well as utilizing support fire from available assets to make breaches in enemy lines, all the while keeping their counterparts close by at all times, moving in sync, and watching each other's backs in combat. With these aspects in mind, early TSFs had a set amount of problems, given the nature of being a new conceptual weapons platform. Early TSF models, based on the American F-4 Phantoms, were bulkier and closer to flying tanks than aircraft. This, along with the use of former Air Force pilots, created a perfect storm which caused the initial high casualties in their ranks. Thus, early naysayers of the prototype weapons were emboldened in their descent. Early deployments consisted of using TSFs as heavily armored units in head-on engagements. They would deploy with heavy weapons and work to suppress the beta advance. Unfortunately, this strategy was flawed against the endless onslaughts of the beta. Their sheer numbers overwhelmed the TSFs, and with the lack of experience of the first-generation pilots, it was not hard to see why there were so many detractors. The early pioneers of TSF development, however, were not to be easily discouraged. As the F-4 saw deployment across multiple theaters, TSF development began shifting to lighter, more agile frames. Instead of working as another armored unit, TSFs began taking the role of specialists. The new training regimen, combined with the deployment of the much lighter F-5 Freedom Fighter and its variants, allowed humanity to finally check the beta's advance. As a result, a prominent new tactic which emerged from these developments and originating in the East German Army was the Laserjagd. A Laserjagd is the use of TSFs to strike deep into a beta herd for the purpose of eliminating all active laser class within the beta group. The advent of this strategy allowed humanity to temporarily regain use of the skies and deploy much needed air support. Thus, implementation of this tactic began a series of changes in general anti-beta defense doctrine. It marked a move from rigid, entrenched battle lines to a more fluid, active battlefield. The linchpin of this new way of fighting had TSFs as the vanguard, becoming humanity's sword against the proverbial Hydra at their gates. From their inception, and the lessons learned through bloody trial and error, TSFs have come a long way. First generation F-4 Phantoms became an iconic and defining invention. Its success made it very popular with militaries around the world, and even today they would continue to use the F-4 and its variants to supplement their forces. For instance, the Japanese Type 77 F-4J Gekishin and the Soviet MiG-21 Balalaika, variants produced within their respective countries based on the F-4. These still saw active combat on the front lines throughout the years leading up to 2001, with the Gekishin still in service for many years later. Though it is not to understate the major advances in TSF technology, which brought the mainstay units of current global militaries. The Type 94 Shiranui, used by the UN and Japanese military, and the American F-15E Strike Eagle. These 3rd and 2.5th generation machines featured innovations in electronics, replacing the aging operation-by-wire systems with advanced fiber optic cables, creating the OBL, operation-by-light electronics. The new OBL system allowed for faster data transfer within the machine, as well as reducing the overall weight of TSFs. A unique feature to TSFs are their control units. Modular by design, able to be swapped out during maintenance, or should a TSF be beyond salvaging, it can be moved to a different machine. The control unit is the entire cockpit itself, comprised of a seat and an exoskeleton meant for emergency escapes. Within a cockpit, a surface pilot's combat data is stored. This data is used by the TSF's onboard computer to better match the machine's movements to the pilot's styles and habits. Such a process relies on heuristic algorithms combining the pilot's indirect thought control and manual input. where repetition of behavior patterns result in increases to a TSF's ability to respond. For example, if a surface pilot prefers to engage the beta at close quarters, the operating system tends to favor a faster reaction time with melee weapons. This data is then reviewed by the maintenance crew, who may then service the TSF in order to optimize the OS for the pilot. These advances, however, do not stop at upgrading and constructing new TSFs. With the need to deploy TSFs at any theater of operations efficiently and with minimal risk, an entire support structure was developed around them. The Type 87 maintenance truck is used by most militaries around the world for land-based transport. Additionally, military cargo aircraft have been refitted to carry TSFs overseas. Notably, the Antonov A-225 Mirya, used by most forces along the Far East Front, is fitted with 2 re-entry shells atop it to house TSFs. At sea, TSFs are transported by various vessels, from TSF carriers, both new and retrofitted, and as the case with Eastern forces, repurposed super oil tankers. With this new support structure devised, it led to the eventual creation of the orbital drop troops. Orbital capabilities then allowed for TSF battalions to deploy around the world in hours, using disposable re-entry shells released from hypersurface shuttle transports, or HSSTs. With such innovations continually being made, the TSF continues to grow at an unprecedented rate. Many variants boast minor or significant upgrades, as well as ever-expanding sets of abilities. In any given theater of battle, TSFs are at the forefront of every major offensive action, with each nation deploying their own variation against the ever-encroaching beta swarms. The tactical surface fighter is the apex of mankind's technological advances against the beta. It was created under desperate means, and though it had a turbulent beginning, it would be baptized in a trial by fire. For decades, humanity developed TSFs, tactics, and surface pilots to better combat their hated enemy. They have become a symbol of not just humanity's sword against the alien invaders, but also a show of status. Surface pilots are a breed all of their own, and the machines they pilot show it. So long as the beta threaten humanity and the Earth, surface pilots will continue to defend it, clad in the modern steel armor like the knights of yore.